"You're just so jealous of your sister," my dad said, his voice dripping with disappointment. "That's what this is really about, isn't it?" I stood in my parents' living room in Louisville, Kentucky, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My mom laughed from the couch, a sharp sound that cut through the tension like glass shattering. She looked at my dad and shook her head as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over not getting dessert. "I'm not going to the wedding," I repeated, keeping my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. "I have my reasons." My dad crossed his arms over his chest, his face already starting to turn that familiar shade of red I'd seen throughout my childhood whenever I disappointed him. "Your reasons? What reasons could you possibly have? Your sister is getting married, Erica. Family shows up for each other. That's what family does. That's what matters." The irony of his words nearly made me laugh out loud, but I swallowed it down along with all the bitter responses fighting to escape. "My name is Erica. I'm 28 years old, and I work as an event coordinator for Brightfen Wealth, a mid-sized financial planning company here in Louisville. I've spent the last 6 years of my life building a career I'm genuinely proud of, organizing conferences and corporate retreats and celebration dinners that bring people together for the moments that matter most. I coordinate events where families celebrate milestones, where colleagues honor achievements, where people show up for the ones they care about. I know better than most people what it means to show up for someone. I know exactly what it costs when they don't show up for you. My sister's name is Brooke. She's 25 years old, works part-time at an upscale boutique downtown, and has always been the golden child in our family for as long as I can remember. Everything she touches seems to turn to magic in my parents' eyes. Every accomplishment is celebrated like she's won an Olympic gold medal. Every setback is cushioned with endless support and understanding. When she announced her engagement to Tyler 3 months ago, my parents acted like she'd been crowned royalty. They threw her an elaborate engagement party at their country club, helped her book the most expensive venue in Louisville, paid for her dress without blinking, and posted about it constantly on every social media platform they could access. Every single day brought a new photo, a new update, a new celebration of Brooke's perfect life and perfect wedding and perfect future. I smiled through all of it, liking the appropriate posts and leaving the appropriate comments, even though my chest felt tight every single time I saw another announcement celebrating her big day. But 8 months ago, I got married too. My wedding was smaller than Brooke's would be, more intimate, but it was meaningful to me in every possible way. I married Owen, a kind and steady man who works as an architect at a respected firm downtown. We'd been together for 4 years, building a life and a partnership that felt solid and real. And when he proposed to me on a quiet evening in our favorite park, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. I sent out invitations to my family 6 weeks in advance, giving them plenty of time to make whatever arrangements they needed. I called my parents personally to make sure they knew the date and time, to confirm they'd received their invitations, to answer any questions they might have had. I even offered to help with travel arrangements if they needed assistance, though they only lived 30 minutes away from the venue I'd chosen. Nobody came. Not my parents. Not my sister. Not my aunt or my uncle or my cousins or anyone else from my side of the family. On the day I married the man I loved more than anything, I stood at that altar with Owen's family, filling every single seat on his side of the aisle, and a haunting, devastating, humiliating emptiness on mine. My best friend Kelsey sat alone in the front row on my side, trying her absolute best to make it look less pathetic by spreading out her belongings and moving around between photos. But nothing could hide the truth. I smiled through the entire ceremony, held Owen's hands as we exchanged our vows, danced at the reception with all the joy I could muster, and pretended with every ounce of strength I possessed that my heart wasn't breaking into smaller and smaller pieces with every single glance at those empty chairs. Afterward, in the days and weeks that followed, my family acted like absolutely nothing had happened. My mom called me a week later to ask how I was doing, her tone casual and light and completely unchanged, like she hadn't just deliberately skipped the most important day of my entire life. When I finally worked up the courage to bring it up, carefully and gently because I was still trying not to rock the boat, she sighed heavily like I was being tiresome and said she'd been busy with a work project that couldn't be postponed. My dad claimed he'd had a critical work conflict he absolutely couldn't get out of. Something about a presentation that had supposedly been scheduled months in advance and couldn't possibly be rescheduled. Brooke never even acknowledged my wedding had happened at all. She just kept posting pictures of her own life, her own plans, her own perfect world, as if my wedding had simply never existed in the first place. I tried so hard to let it go. I told myself over and over that people make mistakes, that maybe they genuinely didn't realize how much their absence had hurt me, that perhaps there were legitimate reasons I didn't fully understand. But the pain lingered like a wound that wouldn't heal, a dull ache that never quite went away, no matter how much time passed. Every time I saw them at Sunday dinners or holiday gatherings, I felt the weight of those empty chairs pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every single time Brooke mentioned her upcoming wedding or showed us another detail she'd planned, I had to physically bite my tongue to keep from screaming at all of them. Now, standing in their living room, as they called me jealous and selfish and dramatic, I realized something that made my stomach turn with a sick feeling. They genuinely didn't think they'd done anything wrong. In their minds, Brooke's wedding was a sacred, unmissable event that absolutely required my presence and my support and my enthusiasm. But mine had been optional at best. Disposable, forgettable, something they could skip without any real consequence or guilt. My mom stood up from the couch and walked over to me with slow, deliberate steps, her expression softening into something that might have looked like genuine concern to someone who didn't know her as well as I did. She reached out to touch my arm in what I'm sure she thought was a comforting gesture, but I stepped back before her hand could make contact. "Erica, sweetie, I know you're upset about something," she said in that patronizing tone I'd heard my entire life, the one that made me feel like a difficult child who needed to be managed. "But you really need to put whatever this is aside for now. This is Brooke's day. She's your little sister. You can't let whatever grudge you're holding on to ruin this for her. She's so excited about this wedding, and she really wants you there to celebrate with her." Grudge. That single word hit me harder than I expected, landing like a physical blow, as if the profound hurt I'd carried for 8 months was petty and small, as if my pain was nothing more than an inconvenience they had to carefully manage, like a difficult seating arrangement or an unexpected weather problem. "I'm not trying to ruin anything for anyone," I said as quietly and calmly as I could manage, though my hands were shaking at my sides. "I'm just not going to the wedding, that's all." My dad's face turned an even deeper shade of red, that vein in his temple starting to pulse the way it always did when he was truly angry. "You're being incredibly selfish right now, Erica. Do you have any idea how this is going to look to everyone? What are we supposed to tell people when they ask where you are? How are we supposed to explain that you couldn't be bothered to show up for your own sister's wedding?" "Tell them the truth," I said, my voice growing sharper despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Tell them I had other plans that I couldn't change." My mom's face twisted into something cold and hard, something ugly that she usually kept hidden beneath her polished exterior. "You're making this entire situation about you, just like you always do. Everything always has to be about Erica and her feelings and her problems. You can't just be happy for your sister for once in your life. You have to turn it into some kind of drama." I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. I wanted to list every single time I'd shown up for them without question or complaint, every birthday party and holiday gathering and family dinner where I'd smiled and pretended everything was perfectly fine when it wasn't. I wanted to remind them of every recital and graduation and celebration where I'd been there with bells on, where I'd cheered and clapped and acted like the supportive daughter and sister they always claimed they wanted me to be. I wanted to throw their hypocrisy right back in their faces, but I didn't say any of that. I just looked at them, These people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and felt a deep, aching sadness settle into my chest like a heavy stone. "I'm not going," I said one final time, my voice firm and clear. Then I turned on my heel and walked out of their house with my head held high, leaving them standing there in their living room in stunned, furious silence. The drive home felt longer than usual, like the distance between their house and mine had somehow stretched and expanded. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I replayed every word of the conversation in my head over and over again. Jealous, selfish, grudge, drama, making it about me. Their words echoed in my mind like a terrible song I couldn't stop hearing, each one a small knife twisting deeper into wounds that had never properly healed. When I finally pulled into my driveway and walked through my front door, Owen was in the kitchen making dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs and something wonderful filled our small apartment, and I could hear him humming along to the music playing softly from his phone speaker. He looked up the moment I walked in, and his face immediately softened with concern when he saw my expression. "How did it go?" he asked gently, setting down the wooden spoon he'd been using to stir something on the stove. I shook my head slowly, unable to find the right words at first. "About as well as I expected it to go, honestly." He wiped his hands carefully on a kitchen towel and walked over to me, pulling me into a warm, solid hug without saying another word. I let myself sink completely into his warmth and his steady presence, so grateful for this man who had never once made me feel like my feelings were too much or unreasonable. "They don't get it," I whispered against his chest, my voice muffled by his shirt. "They really truly don't see what they did to me. They don't understand why I'm hurt." "I know," he said softly, one hand rubbing slow, comforting circles on my back. "But you don't owe them anything, Erica. You don't have to go to this wedding if you don't want to. You don't have to pretend everything is fine when it's not." I pulled back slightly so I could look up at his face. "They called me jealous of Brooke. They said I'm trying to ruin her special day on purpose. My mom said I always make everything about myself." His jaw tightened visibly, and I saw genuine anger flash in his eyes. "They actually said that to you?" I nodded miserably, and he shook his head in complete disbelief at their audacity. "You're literally the least jealous person I know," he said firmly, his voice full of conviction. "You've been nothing but supportive of Brooke through this entire engagement, even after everything she did to you, even after they all treated you like you didn't matter." He was absolutely right about that. I had been supportive through every step of Brooke's engagement. I'd liked all her engagement photos on social media, carefully crafting enthusiastic comments that sounded genuine and sisterly. I'd sent her a congratulatory text message when she first announced the wedding date, even though typing out those words made me feel physically sick. I'd listened patiently to my mom gush endlessly about Brooke's dress and her flowers and her perfect venue and her perfect plans, nodding and smiling like hearing about it didn't make me want to scream. I'd done absolutely everything a good sister was supposed to do in this situation, even though every single gesture felt like swallowing broken glass. But they didn't see it that way at all. In their carefully constructed version of reality, I was the problem child. I was the one causing unnecessary trouble and drama. And that realization hurt more than almost anything else they could have said or done. That night, I lay in bed staring up at our ceiling in the darkness, completely unable to sleep despite my exhaustion. My mind kept circling back obsessively to my wedding day 8 months ago, to those empty chairs that had haunted me ever since, to the forced smiles I'd maintained throughout the entire day. I thought about how incredibly hard I'd tried to make everything absolutely perfect, how much genuine hope I'd carried in my heart that my family would show up and celebrate this milestone with me the way families are supposed to do. I'd chosen my wedding colors so carefully, picked out flowers I thought my mom would absolutely love, selected a menu that included all of my dad's favorite dishes. I'd done everything in my power to make them want to be there with me, and they had deliberately chosen not to come. I thought about my sister Brooke 8 months ago, about 3 weeks before my wedding was supposed to happen. I'd sent her invitation in a beautiful cream-colored envelope with delicate gold lettering. the kind of elegant invitation she'd always said she wanted for her own wedding someday. I'd included a handwritten note on expensive stationery telling her exactly how much it would mean to me to have her there. How I genuinely couldn't imagine getting married without my little sister standing by my side. I'd imagined her standing next to me as a bridesmaid, maybe even as my maid of honor, the way sisters are supposed to support each other during life's biggest moments. Instead, she had thrown it directly into the trash. I knew this because I'd seen it happen with my own eyes. Not in person, obviously, but on the security footage from my parents' house that I still had access to. They'd installed a comprehensive camera system about a year ago, after a string of break-ins in their neighborhood had made them nervous, and I still had complete access to the system from when I'd helped them set the whole thing up initially. I'd gone over there one afternoon to help my dad figure out how to review old footage after he thought he'd seen someone suspicious lurking around in their backyard. He'd given me the login information and told me I could check the cameras anytime if I ever needed to for any reason. I'd checked the footage several weeks after my wedding, driven by this desperate need to understand what had happened. I told myself I was probably being paranoid and oversensitive, that there had to be some reasonable explanation for why my entire family had failed to show up. Maybe the invitations had somehow gotten lost in the mail despite my careful tracking. Maybe there had been some kind of terrible miscommunication that nobody had bothered to mention to me. Maybe they'd had some kind of legitimate emergency they were all too embarrassed to tell me about afterward. What I found on that security footage made my stomach turn violently and changed everything I thought I knew about my family. There was Brooke, standing casually in my parents' kitchen exactly 3 weeks before my wedding, holding my carefully chosen invitation in her hands. She opened it slowly, read through it with a slight frown on her face, and then she laughed. Not just a small, polite chuckle, but a full, genuine, delighted laugh, like she'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. Then she crumpled up my invitation without any hesitation and tossed it directly into the trash can sitting by the counter like it was worthless garbage. She immediately pulled out her phone and called someone, her voice bright and mocking and crystal clear on the audio recording as she said words I knew I would never, ever be able to forget. "Yeah, Erica's getting married, can you believe it? She doesn't deserve a real wedding anyway. Who does she think she is?" I'd saved that footage immediately, downloading it to 3 different locations to make absolutely certain I wouldn't lose it. I didn't really know why I saved it at the time I first watched it. Maybe some deep, instinctive part of me understood that I would need this evidence eventually. Maybe I just desperately wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind, that the pain I felt was completely real and entirely justified. Maybe I needed to be able to look at it whenever I started doubting myself. Whenever I wondered if maybe I was overreacting or being too sensitive about the whole situation like my parents always implied. Now, lying there in the darkness of my bedroom with Owen sleeping peacefully beside me, I realized exactly what I was going to do with that footage. The next morning, my phone buzzed insistently with a text message from my mom. I stared at the screen for a long moment, before I could bring myself to open it and read what she had to say. "We need to talk seriously about your attitude, Erica. Your father and I are very disappointed in your behavior yesterday. Please reconsider attending the wedding. Brooke deserves better than this from her own sister. Family is everything. Don't throw that away over nothing." Over nothing. That's what my wedding was to them. My marriage, my happiness, my pain, all of it added up to absolutely nothing in their eyes. I stared at that message for what felt like hours, my thumb hovering uncertainly over the keyboard as I tried to decide how to respond. Part of me desperately wanted to type out everything I was feeling in painful detail, to tell her exactly why I wasn't going to that wedding and force her to understand the true depth of what they'd all done to me. I wanted to send her screenshots of my wedding photos showing those devastatingly empty chairs on my side. I wanted to ask her directly how she would have felt if I'd skipped her own wedding all those years ago. I wanted to make her feel even just a tiny fraction of the pain I'd been carrying around like a weight for 8 solid months, but I knew with absolute certainty that it wouldn't matter at all. They'd already decided I was the villain in their version of this story. No amount of explanation or evidence or emotional honesty would ever change their minds about that fundamental fact. Instead of pouring out my heart, I typed a simple, clear reply. I'm not coming to the wedding, but I'll send something special for the reception. My mom's response came back almost immediately. What does that mean? I didn't answer her question. I just set my phone down on the kitchen counter and opened my laptop with steady hands, pulling up that saved security footage I'd been keeping for exactly this moment. I watched it one more time, my sister's cruel, delighted laughter filling the quiet morning air in my apartment. Then I opened my video editing software and got to work with careful precision. I didn't need anything fancy or complicated, just a simple, clear clip that would be absolutely undeniable to anyone who watched it. I trimmed the footage carefully to start right at the moment when Brooke picked up my invitation and to end right after she threw it away and made that mocking phone call to her friend. The entire clip was less than 2 minutes long, but it was completely devastating in its crystal clarity. There was no room for misinterpretation or excuses. I added a simple title screen at the very beginning with plain white text on a black background that said, "To my family, with love." Then I exported the file in the highest quality possible and saved it with the most neutral name I could think of, my message. When I was finally done, I sat back in my chair and just stared at the screen for a long time. My heart was pounding so hard in my chest I could hear it in my ears, this wild mix of genuine fear and pure exhilaration coursing through my entire body. This was it. This was the exact moment I stopped passively swallowing my pain and started actively demanding that they see it, that they acknowledge it, that they face what they'd done. I attached the video file to an email and carefully typed in my parents' email address. In the subject line, I wrote simply, "For the reception." In the body of the email, I decided to keep it short and direct. I won't be attending Brooke's wedding, but I wanted to send this video message to be played during the reception. Please make sure it gets shown to everyone. It's important to me that the truth finally comes out. Then I took a deep breath and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The days leading up to Brooke's wedding were incredibly strange and unsettling. My phone stayed mostly quiet, which was highly unusual for my typically overbearing family. Normally, my mom would have been calling me every other hour at minimum, trying relentlessly to guilt me into changing my mind or persuade me to see things from their skewed perspective. But after I sent that email with the video attached, there was absolutely nothing from any of them. Just eerie, uncomfortable silence. I kept telling myself it was probably for the best. Maybe they were finally actually respecting my clearly stated decision for once in their lives. Maybe they'd decided to focus entirely on Brooke's big day instead of continuing to drag me into more exhausting drama. But deep down in my gut, I knew the real truth. They were furious with me. They thought I was being difficult and stubborn and unreasonable, and they were deliberately choosing to shut me out completely, rather than deal with my feelings in any meaningful way. That's what they'd always done throughout my entire life, whenever I didn't fall perfectly in line with their expectations. Owen noticed the shift in my mood almost immediately. He found me one evening sitting alone on the couch, staring blankly at the television even though I couldn't have told anyone what was actually playing on the screen. "You okay?" he asked gently, sitting down beside me and taking my hand in his. I nodded automatically, but I could tell from his expression that he didn't believe me for even a second. Owen had always been able to read me better than anyone else in my entire life. "You can still change your mind about all of this," he said carefully. "If you want to go to the wedding after all, we can absolutely go together. I'll be right there with you the whole time, I promise." I shook my head firmly and decisively. "I don't want to go. I really don't. I just wish things were different. I wish they could actually see what they did to me." He put his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him gratefully, so thankful for his solid, unwavering presence in my life. Owen had been my rock through absolutely all of this chaos. He never once pushed me to reconcile with my family, never told me I was overreacting or being too sensitive about any of it. He just listened carefully and supported me completely, which was genuinely more than I could say for anyone else. "Do you think they'll actually play the video at the reception?" I I asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been nagging at me constantly for days. Owen hesitated for just a moment, clearly thinking carefully about his answer. I honestly don't know, but if they do play it, it's going to change absolutely everything. I nodded slowly. That was exactly what I was counting on. That was what terrified me most. 3 days before the wedding was scheduled to happen, my mom finally called my phone. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment, almost deciding not to answer at all, but curiosity eventually got the better of me. Hello? I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Erica. Her voice was tight and controlled, like she was barely holding back a tsunami of anger. We need to have a serious talk about this video you sent us. My heart immediately skipped a beat. What about it? Your father and I watched it this morning. We honestly don't understand what you're trying to accomplish here. What were you possibly thinking? I frowned, genuine confusion mixing with sharp disappointment. You watched it already? I thought it was supposed to be for the reception, for everyone to see. We wanted to make absolutely sure it was appropriate content before we played it in front of 200 guests at your sister's wedding, she said, her tone clipped and cold. And frankly, Erica, this is completely unacceptable. You're deliberately trying to embarrass your sister on her wedding day. You're trying to humiliate her in front of everyone we know. We're absolutely not going to play this video. My stomach dropped sickeningly, like I'd just been pushed off a cliff. Of course they'd watched it ahead of time. Of course they'd found a way to intercept it before anyone else could possibly see the truth. They were protecting Brooke, exactly like they'd always done my entire life. It's not about embarrassing her, I said, my voice shaking despite my absolute best efforts to stay calm and rational. It's about showing everyone the truth. She threw away my wedding invitation, Mom. She laughed at me. She said I didn't deserve a real wedding. And then none of you even bothered to show up. None of you even apologized afterward. My mom sighed heavily, the sound dripping with frustration, and something that might have been guilt if I didn't know her quite so well. Erica, that was months and months ago. We've all moved on from that. Why are you insisting on dragging this up now? Why can't you just let it go and be happy for your sister? Because you never acknowledged what you did, I snapped, my anger finally boiling over despite my attempts to contain it. You never apologized even once. You never even admitted that you did anything wrong at all. You just pretended nothing happened and expected me to do exactly the same thing. You expected me to smile and be supportive while you all acted like my wedding didn't even matter. We had our legitimate reasons for not attending your wedding, she said defensively, her voice rising slightly. It wasn't personal, Erica. You're making this into something it's not. It felt pretty damn personal to me, Mom. It felt personal when I stood at that altar and looked out at empty chairs where my family should have been. It felt personal when I had to explain to the photographer why there weren't going to be any family photos from my side. It felt personal when Brooke threw my invitation in the trash like it was worthless garbage. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my mom breathing, could practically picture her standing in her pristine kitchen, trying desperately to figure out how to spin this situation in a way that made them look good and made me look unreasonable. Then she spoke again, her voice even colder than before, more final and dismissive. If you don't want to come to the wedding, that's fine. That's your choice to make. But we're absolutely not playing this video. It's cruel, and it's vindictive, and frankly, it's beneath you. This is not who we raised you to be, Erica. Cruel, I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. What Brooke did was cruel. What you and Dad did was cruel. I'm just showing people what actually happened. I'm just telling the truth for once. You're trying to ruin her special day. You're trying to make her wedding about you and your hurt feelings instead of about her happiness. That's what this is really about. I'm trying to tell the truth. My voice cracked with emotion, and I hated how desperate I sounded. My mom's voice turned absolutely icy, taking on that tone she used when an argument was completely over and her word was final. This conversation is over, Erica. If you change your mind about attending, let us know. Otherwise, stay home and wallow in your bitterness. But we're not playing that video, and that's absolutely final. Goodbye. She hung up abruptly before I could respond, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone still pressed to my ear, my heart pounding and my hands shaking uncontrollably. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table, staring at my phone and replaying the entire conversation in my head over and over. They weren't going to play the video. After everything, after all the pain they'd caused, they were still protecting Brooke, still making me the villain in their twisted story. It felt like a punch directly to the gut, like all the air had been violently knocked out of my lungs. Owen found me sitting there several minutes later, tears streaming down my face. He didn't say anything at first, just pulled out a chair and sat beside me, taking my hand gently in his. "What happened?" he finally asked, his voice full of concern. I told him absolutely everything. About the phone call, about my mom's reaction, about how they'd watched the video privately and decided not to play it at the reception. About how they still thought I was the one in the wrong, how they'd somehow managed to turn my pain into a character flaw. He listened carefully, his expression darkening with each word I spoke. When I finally finished, he was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. "They can't just bury this," he said finally, his voice firm and determined. "They don't get to decide what's true and what's not. They don't get to protect Brooke from the consequences of what she did." "But they did," I said bitterly, wiping at my eyes. "They watched it, and they still chose her over me. They always choose her." Owen was quiet for another moment, clearly thinking hard about something. Then he said carefully, "What if you sent it to someone else?" I looked up at him, confused and exhausted. "What do you mean?" "Your parents aren't the only ones with access to the reception," he said, his voice growing more confident. "What about the venue itself, or the DJ? Someone who could play it without them knowing ahead of time. Someone who wouldn't ask permission first." I blinked slowly, the idea taking shape in my mind like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. It was risky. It was bold. It was exactly the kind of thing that would make my family hate me forever. But maybe I was finally okay with that. "I don't know," I said hesitantly. "That feels like crossing a serious line. That feels like I'm really trying to ruin her wedding." "They crossed the line first," Owen said firmly, his hand squeezing mine. "You have every right to defend yourself. You have every right to show people the truth. They ruined your wedding, Erica. They don't get to pretend they didn't." I thought about it for a long time, carefully weighing all the possible consequences. If I went through with this plan, my family would probably never forgive me. My parents would almost certainly cut me off completely. Brooke would hate me forever. But then again, had they ever really loved me in the first place? Had they ever actually treated me like I mattered? "Okay," I said finally, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "Let's do it." The next day, I called the venue where Brooke's reception was being held. I knew the place reasonably well because I'd actually worked with them several times through my job at Brightfin Wealth. We'd hosted corporate events there, retirement parties, anniversary celebrations. The venue was absolutely beautiful, with soaring high ceilings and elegant crystal chandeliers, the kind of place that made every single event feel special and important. I'd worked directly with their events coordinator, a woman named Jenna, on multiple occasions over the years. She was efficient and professional, always going above and beyond to make sure everything ran smoothly. More importantly for my current purposes, she trusted me because of our established working relationship. "Hey, Jenna, it's Erica," I said when she answered, carefully keeping my voice light and friendly. "Erica, how are you? I heard your sister's getting married this weekend at our venue. That's so exciting. Small world, right? I forced a bright smile, even though she obviously couldn't see me through the phone. Yeah, it's going to be a really big event. Actually, that's exactly why I'm calling. I wanted to send over a special video message to be played during the reception. It's a surprise for the family, something really meaningful I want to share. Oh, that's so incredibly sweet, Jenna said enthusiastically. Of course, we can absolutely do that. Just send it over, and I'll make sure the AV team has it ready to go. When would you like it played? During the toasts would be absolutely perfect, I said. Maybe right after the maid of honor speaks? I think that would be the best timing for maximum impact. Sounds good to me. Just email it to me this afternoon, and I'll coordinate everything with the DJ and the AV tech. We'll make sure it's a complete surprise. Perfect, I said, relief flooding through my entire body. And Jenna, this is really important to me. My parents don't know about it, so if they happen to ask, can you just say it's a surprise video message from me? Don't tell them what's actually in it. Absolutely, she said warmly. I love a good surprise. It's so thoughtful of you to do this, even though you can't be there in person. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. No problem at all. And hey, it was great hearing from you. We should grab coffee sometime soon and catch up properly. Definitely, I said, even though I knew with certainty that I'd probably never talk to her again after this weekend. After the video played, my reputation in Louisville's event planning circles might be completely destroyed, but I was past caring about that. When I hung up, I sat back in my chair and took a deep, steadying breath. This was really it. There was absolutely no turning back now. I just set in motion something that would change my family forever, something that couldn't be undone. I sent the video to Jenna that afternoon, with a carefully worded email explaining that it was a personal message for my sister's wedding reception, to be played during the toasts as a special surprise. I emphasized again that my family didn't know about it, and that I wanted it to be a meaningful moment. Jenna responded within an hour with a cheerful confirmation, completely unaware of what she was about to unleash on that reception. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept imagining the moment the video would play, the screen lighting up with footage of Brooke throwing away my invitation like trash. I pictured my parents' faces draining of all color, Brooke's expression shifting from pure joy to absolute horror, the confused murmurs rippling through the crowd of 200 guests. Part of me felt genuinely guilty for what I was about to do. Part of me felt terrified of the inevitable consequences. But a much bigger part of me felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Real, genuine power. For 8 months, I'd been completely powerless. I'd been the victim of their cruelty, the forgotten daughter, the sister whose feelings didn't matter even a little bit. I'd been the afterthought in their perfect family narrative, the one they could ignore without any real consequence. But now, finally, I was taking control. I was forcing them to see what they'd done, whether they wanted to or not. Owen found me sitting on the edge of our bed at 2 a.m, staring at the wall, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quiet or control. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently, sitting down beside me and putting his arm around my shoulders. I shook my head. I keep thinking about what's going to happen. I keep imagining their faces when they see it. Are you having second thoughts about this? I thought about it for a long moment, really considered backing out completely. I could call Jenna first thing in the morning, tell her there'd been a terrible mistake, ask her to delete the video before anyone saw it. I could show up at the wedding and pretend everything was perfectly fine, smile through the ceremony and the reception like the good daughter and sister they wanted me to be. But then I thought about my wedding day. I thought about those empty chairs and the pitying looks from Owen's family. I thought about Brooke's cruel laughter as she threw my invitation away, her casual cruelty as she told someone I didn't deserve happiness. I thought about my parents' complete dismissal of my pain, their absolute refusal to even acknowledge what they'd done. I shook my head again, more firmly this time. No, I need to do this. I need them to see. He took my hand and squeezed it gently. Then we'll get through it together. No matter what happens, no matter how bad the fallout gets, I'm here. You're not alone in this. I looked at him. This man who had stood by me through absolutely everything, who had held me when I cried about my family's absence at our wedding, who had never once made me feel like my pain was an overreaction. I felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for believing me." "Always," he said, kissing my forehead tenderly. "Now try to get some sleep. Saturday's going to be a very long day." But sleep didn't come at all. I lay awake until the sun started to rise, my mind spinning with anticipation and dread. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with a strange sense of calm settling over me. The anxiety and fear from the previous night had somehow faded, replaced by a quiet determination. I made myself a proper breakfast, went for a long run through our neighborhood, and spent the afternoon reading a book on the porch while Owen worked in his home office. Around 4 in the afternoon, the time I knew the ceremony was starting, I thought about Brooke walking down the aisle in her expensive white dress. I imagined my parents beaming with pride, my dad probably tearing up as he watched his youngest daughter get married. I wondered if they were thinking about me at all, or if they'd already written me off as the jealous sister who couldn't handle her siblings' happiness. I checked my phone obsessively, even though I knew nothing would happen until the reception started. The ceremony would last about 30 minutes, then there would be a cocktail hour while the wedding party took elaborate photos. The reception would start around 6, with dinner served shortly after. The toasts typically happened around 7:30 or 8, once everyone had eaten, and the champagne was flowing freely. That's when my video would play. By 6 in the evening, I was pacing around our living room, completely unable to sit still. Owen suggested we watch a movie to distract me, but I couldn't focus on anything. At 6:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Kelsey, my best friend who I'd begged to attend the wedding as my spy. "Are you watching this somehow? Because holy crap, Erica. Holy crap." My heart immediately started pounding. "What's happening?" I texted back with shaking hands. "Your video just played. Everyone is losing it. Your parents look like they've seen a ghost. Brooke is crying. This is absolutely insane." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. It had worked. The video had actually played. And now, the truth was finally out. My phone exploded with notifications. Texts, calls, voicemails, all coming in rapid succession like fireworks. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat there, watching the screen light up over and over again. Owen leaned over and looked at the messages. "Your mom's calling. Your dad's calling. Even Brooke." "I know," I said quietly. "Are you going to answer?" I shook my head firmly. "Not yet. Let them sit with it for a while." We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of what I'd done settling over me like a heavy blanket. I'd just blown up my family's perfect narrative in front of everyone they knew. There would be consequences. There would be anger and hurt and probably years of estrangement. But as I sat there, I realized something profound. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel scared. I felt free. Around 8, there was a loud knock on the door. I froze, and Owen gave me a questioning look. "Should I answer it?" he asked. I nodded slowly, my heart pounding. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole, then turned back to me with a grim expression. "It's your dad." I took a deep breath and stood up. "Let him in." Owen opened the door, and my dad stood there, his face red and twisted with rage. "What the hell were you thinking?" he shouted immediately. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" I crossed my arms, forcing myself to stay calm. I told the truth. "You humiliated your sister. You ruined her wedding." "No," I said firmly. "Brooke ruined my wedding. I just made sure everyone knew about it. My dad's hands clenched into fists. That video was 8 months old. You've been holding on to that this whole time. I wasn't trying to hurt her, I said. I was trying to show you what she did to me. We didn't do anything to you, he yelled. So we missed your wedding. So what? His words hit me like a slap. After everything, he still didn't get it. Get out, I said quietly. He blinked. What? Get out of my house. If you can't see why what you did was wrong, then I don't want you here. His face turned even redder. You're going to regret this, Erica. You're going to lose your whole family. Maybe, I said steadily, but at least I'll have my dignity. He stared at me, then stormed out, slamming the door. I stood there trembling as Owen wrapped his arms around me. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. I think so. Over the next few days, the fallout continued. My mom sent a long, angry email accusing me of being vindictive and cruel. Brooke left a tearful voicemail calling me a horrible sister. Even extended family reached out, most siding with my parents. But there were a few who didn't. My cousin Fiona called to say she understood why I'd done it. Kelsey stopped by with wine, letting me vent. Owen's family reached out to remind me I was loved. The thing that surprised me most was the number of people at the reception who reached out privately to say they'd had no idea what my family had done. Some apologized for not being at my wedding. Others said they'd lost respect for my parents. It wasn't universal condemnation. It was complicated. Some understood. Some didn't. But at least now, they all knew the truth. 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a text from Brooke. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore her, but curiosity won. I texted back. Fine. Coffee tomorrow at 10 a.m. The next morning I sat in a small cafe waiting. When Brooke walked in, she looked different, smaller. Her eyes were red, no makeup. She sat across from me without speaking. Why did you do it? She finally asked. Because you never apologized, I said simply. You threw away my invitation and mocked me. Tears filled her eyes. I know, I was awful. I was jealous. I blinked. Jealous? Of what? Of you, she said. You've always had your life together. When you got engaged, it felt like you were leaving me behind. Part of me wanted sympathy. But I was still angry. That doesn't excuse what you did, I said. I know, she said. I'm not making excuses. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I looked at her and felt something shift. Not forgiveness yet, but understanding. Thank you, I said. I appreciate that. We sat in silence. Then Brooke stood. I hope one day we can be close again, she said. Maybe, I said. But it's going to take time. She nodded and left. My parents never apologized. They doubled down, insisting I'd overreacted. They stopped inviting me to gatherings, stopped calling, stopped acknowledging me. It hurt, but not as much as I thought it would. I'd spent so long trying to earn their approval. Now I realized I didn't need it. I had Owen, Kelsey, a life I was proud of, and that was enough. Brooke's marriage didn't last. They separated less than a year later. I heard the video had caused a rift Tyler couldn't get past. Part of me felt bad, but another part thought it was fitting. Actions have consequences. As for me, I threw myself into work, earning a promotion to senior event coordinator at Brightfen Wealth. Owen and I started talking about buying a house, maybe starting a family. Life moved forward, and I felt lighter than I had in years. One evening, about a year after the wedding, I was cleaning out my email and found the original video file. I stared at it, remembering the anger and hurt that had driven me to create it. Owen found me at the computer. What are you looking at? He asked. The video, I said quietly. He looked at the screen, then at me. Do you regret it? I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No, but I'm ready to move on. He smiled and kissed my forehead. Then move on. I deleted the file. It was time to focus on the future, on the people who actually cared. A few months later, I got a letter from my mom. Dear Erica, it began. Your father and I have been thinking. We realize we didn't handle things well after your wedding. We should have been there, and we're sorry. We hope one day we can rebuild. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. It wasn't the apology I'd wanted. It was vague, non-committal, but it was something. I showed Owen. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said honestly. He nodded. Take your time. Whatever you decide, I support you. I put the letter in a drawer, not ready to respond, but not ready to throw it away. 2 years after the video, my family had fractured permanently. My parents rarely spoke to me. Brooke had moved away after her divorce, starting over. I heard she was doing better. I was happy for her, even if we weren't close. As for me, I'd found peace. Owen and I bought a house with a big backyard. We talked about kids, about our future. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. Looking back, I realized the video wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice, refusing to let my pain be dismissed. My family had tried to erase what they'd done, but I'd refused to let that happen. I'd forced them to see the truth, even if it meant burning bridges. 3 years later, I finally responded to my mother's letter. I acknowledged their apology, but was clear about what I needed. I explained I couldn't have a relationship if they continued dismissing my pain. If we were going to rebuild, it had to be on honesty and respect. 2 weeks later, my mom called. Erica, she said softly, I got your letter. You're right. We need to take responsibility. I was shocked. Really? Really, she said. We've been in therapy. We see now that we treated you unfairly. We talked for an hour. She asked about my life. She told me about therapy, how hard it had been. She admitted the video had forced them to confront things they'd avoided. I was so angry at you, she said. But I realized you did it because we weren't listening. I didn't want to hurt Brooke, I said. I just wanted you to understand. I know that now, she said. Over the following months, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. My dad apologized. My mom admitted she'd been afraid to acknowledge their favoritism. It was painful work, but healing. Brooke and I remained distant. Maybe someday we'd reconcile. But for now, distance felt healthiest. Now, 5 years after the video, I stood in our backyard watching Owen play with our dog Charlie. We'd been talking about kids. What if I'm not a good mother? I'd asked. You won't repeat their mistakes, Owen said. You know what they look like. As I watched the evening light, I thought about everything. The pain of being overlooked, the empty chairs, the courage to send that video, the healing. My parents had lost years with me, damaged their reputation, faced who they'd been. Brooke's marriage had ended partly because of her cruelty. They'd all paid a price. But more importantly, I thought about my journey. How I'd gone from desperately seeking approval to knowing my worth. How I'd built a life filled with genuine love. The revenge wasn't about destroying my family. It was about forcing them to see truth. And I'd freed myself from needing their validation. Looking back, the video had been a turning point. It cost me relationships, caused pain, but it gave me something invaluable. The power to tell my truth, to refuse silence, to demand acknowledgement. If I had to do it again, I would still send that video. Because some truths need telling, even when ugly. Because sometimes you have to burn down the old to build something better. because choosing yourself, even when it means losing others, is the most important choice. As I stood in my backyard, in the life I'd built, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not forced peace, but real peace from living authentically, from being surrounded by people who truly love you, from knowing you have strength to stand up for yourself. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all.